Hey, everybody, and welcome to Engineering Out Loud. This is our very first deep dive, and we're going to be taking a look at some material that you sent in all about product development.
We're so excited to be kicking off this series using your material from MECHESOL's MESP Engineering Development
And
Program.
we're going to be focusing specifically on this document called Product Development Steps.
And for any listeners who want to follow along with their own copy, you can head over to mechesolco.com/CPD to register and learn more. Now, this deep dive is all about giving you a shortcut, a way to go from that initial idea in your head to a real-life product.
In your document here, it's got some really interesting stuff, some surprisingly specific steps that I think are going to be really helpful.
Yeah.
So to help break it all down, we've got our expert here with us today.
Who can tell us not just what these steps are, but why they're so important?
Absolutely. I'm excited to dig into the details.
Okay, so your document here, it's got this section, Product Development Steps, and the first one on the list is Project Onboarding, which, I mean, that makes sense, right? You got to get the project on board before you can really start working on it.
But then right away, your document goes into this thing called the Initial Feasibility Review. Why is that so important? I mean, why not just jump right into the design phase?
Well, that's where a lot of people, I think they get tripped up right out of the gate. You know, it's so easy to get caught up in the excitement of a new idea. But if you don't take the time to do that feasibility check, you could end up putting a ton of time and energy and resources into something that just might not be possible. Or might be possible, but it's not going to be profitable. Or maybe there's just not even a market for it.
So you're saying it's kind of like a reality check before you really get started.
Exactly. It's like you wouldn't build a house without making sure that you had a good foundation first.
Right. This feasibility review, it's all about making sure that you're building on solid ground. Okay, that makes sense. So what are the things that we should be looking at during this initial feasibility review? What are the big pieces?
So there are a few key things. First, you've got to look at the technical side of things. Can this thing even be built? Is the technology there?
Can it be manufactured on a large scale?
Yeah.
And are the materials you need even available?
So, it's not enough to just imagine a self-folding laundry basket. The technology to actually make that happen has to exist.
Exactly. And even if the technology does exist, you got to think about the economics of it. Can you actually make money selling this thing?
How much is it going to cost to produce? And can you sell it for a price that people are willing to pay? But that's also going to make you a profit.
Right. It's like they say, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Exactly. You might have the best idea since sliced bread, but if it costs $1 million to make, nobody's going to buy it.
Good point. So are there other things we need to think about during this initial review?
Yeah, definitely. You also have to do your market research.
I mean, is there actually a demand for this product? Who are you making it for? What are their needs? What problems are you trying to solve for them?
Right. You got to find a need and fill it. You need to make sure that there are actually people out there who are going to want what you're building.
That's it. And while you're looking at the market, you got to think about the competition too. Who else is already out there doing something similar?
And what makes your product different? What makes it better or unique?
It's not just about having a cool idea. It's about having an idea that people actually need. That's different from what's already out there.
Exactly. And, another thing that often gets overlooked is risk and compliance.
Risk and compliance. Okay, that sounds a little intimidating. What exactly does that mean?
Basically, you need to figure out if there are any potential problems with your product down the line, any safety concerns. Does it meet all the regulations and standards for your industry?
It's better to figure this stuff out early on than to get hit with a lawsuit or have to recall your product later.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
But this is a lot to think about.
I mean, the technical stuff, the market, the risks.
Yeah.
It seems kind of overwhelming.
It can be a lot. That's why this document, it talks about reviewing your resources and making a timeline.
Okay, so what does it mean to review your resources?
It means you got to be realistic about what you have to work with. Do you have the right team? Do they have the skills and experience to pull this off?
Is your budget big enough?
Yeah.
And is the scope of the project achievable with what you have?
So you're saying we got to keep our expectations in check.
Exactly. And once you've got a handle on your resources, you can start to make a timeline.
When do you think you'll hit certain milestones? When can you realistically expect to launch?
And then comes the really big question. Are we going to do this or not?
Yep. That's the whole point of this initial feasibility review. To give you enough information to decide if it's worth moving forward with your idea. It's all about reducing risk and setting yourself up for success. And, for anyone who wants to really master these skills, MECHESOL's engineering development program, that's a fantastic resource. They've got expert guidance and tons of valuable information. You can visit mechesolco.com lifecycle.com/CPD to learn more and apply today.
So basically, this first stage is all about asking the hard questions, even if you don't like the answers.
Because it's better to know now if your idea isn't going to work than to waste a bunch of time and money on it.
Right, exactly. It might seem kind of boring to spend all this time on the groundwork, but trust me, it's worth it. This initial phase can make or break your product.
So for everyone listening out there, if you're serious about bringing your product to life, don't skip this step. All right, so we've done our homework and we've decided to go for it. Now what's next? What comes after this initial feasibility review?
Well, then it starts to get really interesting. We get to dive into the heart of the product. This is where we really get into the meat of it. This next stage, it's all about taking that idea and turning it into something real. The document calls it research and concept development.
So we're moving from can we do this to how do we do this?
Yeah, exactly. And the first step, according to your document, is technical research.
Yeah.
It's all about really understanding the technical side of things. What's the current technology like? What are the limitations? Are there any new technologies coming out that could be helpful?
So it's not just about coming up with ideas. It's about making sure those ideas are actually grounded in reality.
Exactly. And then once you've got a good understanding of the technical stuff, you got to switch gears and think about the people who are actually going to be using your product. The document calls this market and user insights.
Because at the end of the day, you're not building a product for yourself, you're building it for other people.
Right. So this is where you really dig into who your target market is, what are their needs, what are their pain points, what are they looking for.
You got to make sure you're actually solving a real problem for people.
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter how cool your product is. If nobody wants it, it's not going to sell.
That's right. You need to validate those assumptions you made during the feasibility review. Make sure there's a real market for your product.
So we've done our technical research. We've got a good grasp on our target market. What's next?
Well, now comes the fun part. Idea generation and evaluation. This is where you get to brainstorm. Come up with as many different ideas and solutions as you can.
Let those creative juices flow.
Exactly. But you don't want to get too carried away.
Right.
You still got to keep in mind all that research you did about the technology and the market.
It's about finding that balance between being creative and being realistic.
Right. And that's where the next step comes in concept selection. You've got all these great ideas, but now you have to choose the best one, the one that's got the most potential.
It's like a beauty pageant for product ideas. Only one can be crowned the winner.
Huh. I like that. And once you've got your winning concept, it's time to move on to the next phase, design and engineering. Now, this is where things start to get really exciting. Your document breaks this down into 3 parts: design for concept, product visualization, and design for functional prototype.
Okay, let's break those down. What does design for concept actually mean?
It means taking that idea that you've chosen and turning it into an actual design. You're making sketches, drawing diagrams, maybe even building some basic 3D models.
So basically, you're creating a visual representation of your product.
Exactly. You're figuring out the shape, the features, how everything is going to fit together.
And I'm guessing there's a lot of back and forth at this stage, right? A lot of trying things out and making adjustments.
Oh, absolutely. It's all about iteration and refinement. You got to get it just right. And once you've got the design nailed down, then you move on to product visualization. This is where you create those really high-quality visuals that show what the product is going to look and feel like.
So think like 3D models, renderings, animations, that kind of thing.
You got it. And these visuals are super important, not just for the design team, but also for sharing with stakeholders, investors, potential customers.
It's about bringing that vision to life so that everyone can get on board.
Exactly. Okay, so we've got our concept, we've got our visuals. What's the last part of this design and engineering phase?
That would be design for functional prototype. This is where we take a big step from the digital world to the real world.
Exactly. You've got your design all figured out, but now you need to build a prototype that actually works.
Ah, prototypes. The bridge between imagination and reality. Tell me more about this. What makes a prototype functional, and how do we even go about designing one?
Well, that's a great question. Want to learn how to build amazing products that people actually want? Apply for MECHESOL's engineering development program at mechesolco.com/CPD and make those product dreams a reality. Now back to those prototypes. So a functional prototype, it's not just about looks. It's about making sure that the core functions of your product, they actually work. So you're picking the right materials, figuring out the manufacturing process, making sure you have something that you can actually test and refine.
So it's like you can bake a cake that looks amazing, but if it doesn't taste good, what's the point? You need both form and function.
Exactly. The cake analogy strikes again. Okay, so we've got our functional prototype. In your document here, it says the next step is prototyping for Outlook verification.
Okay, so we're verifying the outlook. What does that even mean?
So think of it like this. You're designing a costume, right? You've got all the pieces put together,
Yeah.
but now you need to make sure it actually looks good on the person.
So it's about making sure the prototype not only works, but it also has that look and feel of the final product.
Yeah, you're checking the ergonomics. How does it feel in your hand? Does it look right? Does it give off the right vibe?
I imagine there's probably a lot of back and forth at this stage, too. Like a
Right.
lot of tweaking and refining the design.
For sure. It's all about making it better and better. And then once you're happy the way it looks and feels, you move on to prototype creation.
It seems like we're getting close to the finish line now. What happens during this stage?
This is where you build a prototype that's as close to the real deal as possible. You're using the actual materials, the manufacturing techniques, everything, just like you would for the final product.
It's like the dress rehearsal before the big show.
Exactly. And then once you've got your prototype all ready to go, it's time for prototype functional testing. Time to really put it through its paces.
Showtime. What kind of tests are we talking about here?
Well, it all depends on what you're making right. But the goal is to see how it performs in the real world. You might do stress tests, usability tests, environmental tests, anything to see how it holds up under pressure.
You're trying to break it, basically.
Pretty much. And all the data you collect from those tests,
Yeah.
that's what you use to make those final design tweaks before you move on to mass production.
So we've tested it, we've refined it, we've made it as good as it can be. Now we're ready for the big leagues. Mass production, what does that actually entail?
Mass production, it's all about taking that one prototype and scaling it up.
Mm.
You might be making hundreds, thousands, even millions of these things. So it takes a lot of planning and coordination.
That sounds intense.
Your document breaks it down into three main parts: procurement and sourcing, design for manufacturing, and then finally mass production.
Okay, so first up, procurement and sourcing. What goes on there?
That's where you get all your materials and components. You got to find suppliers you can trust and make sure you're getting the best quality for the best price.
It's a balancing act.
Definitely. You don't want to cheap out on materials, but you also don't want to overpay. Once you've got your materials, it's time for design for manufacturing.
And this is where we make sure that the product is actually manufacturable,
Right.
that we can make a lot of them efficiently and cost effectively.
Exactly. You might need to simplify the design, reduce the number of parts, anything you can do to streamline that manufacturing process.
So we're thinking like a manufacturer now, making sure our design is actually feasible for mass production.
Exactly. And once you've got the design finalized, you're ready to hit the ground running mass production time.
This is it. Factories are buzzing. Assembly lines are rolling. It's an exciting time for any product developer. But we can't forget about quality control, right?
Absolutely. The document is very clear about this. You got to maintain those high standards throughout the entire production process. So that means regular quality checks, rigorous testing, and a commitment to always finding ways to improve.
So it's about catching those defects before they get to the customer.
Exactly. Okay, so we've got a mountain of amazing products all ready to go. What's the last step? What does the document say?
It says quality control and logistics. That's the final stage.
Right. It's all about making sure that your product not only meets those high standards of quality, but that it also gets into the hands of your customers quickly and efficiently.
The last mile.
Exactly. And they break it down into three parts: quality assurance, product optimization, and supply chain and logistics. So quality assurance, that's all those systems you have in place to make sure that every single product that comes off the line is top-notch.
And then there's product optimization. So even after the product is out in the world, we're still looking for ways to make it better.
Absolutely. You're listening to customer feedback, looking at the data, and making changes and improvements all the time.
A product is never really finished, is it? There's always room for improvement.
That's the spirit.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, we have supply chain and logistics. That's all about getting the product from point A to point B as smoothly and cost-effectively as possible.
So we're talking about shipping, storage, delivery, all that good stuff.
Exactly. It's about making sure that whole process is as seamless as possible. And there you have it. That's the product development journey from start to finish.
Wow, what an adventure. We've covered so much ground today. It's amazing to see all the thought and planning that goes into bringing a product to life.
It's a complex process,
Yeah.
but with a solid roadmap and a commitment to quality, it's definitely achievable.
And speaking of roadmaps, this document that you sent us, Product Development Steps from MECHESOL's MESP Engineering Development Program, This is a fantastic resource for anyone who's serious about product development.
I couldn't agree more. And if you're ready to take your skills to the next level, I highly recommend checking out their full engineering development program.
Absolutely. You can learn more and apply at mechesolco.com/CPD. Take that next step and make your product dreams a reality.
All right, that's all the time we have for today, but we'll be back soon with another deep dive.
Until next time.
Keep those ideas flowing.